Is Thragg somehow still a fraud? Is Invincible secretly Jamaican? Is Robot the lamest nigga in all of fiction? Find out on today's episode of Invincible, The Fraud Files. Invincible is an amazing show. Behind all the dumbass character moments, questionable animation, and even more questionable wardrobe choices, there exists one of the best comic book adaptations ever made. But with season 4 ending, I figured we'd take a look at 5 of the most clowned on characters in the show: Immortal, Omni-Man, Robot, Mark, and Thragg, and grade whether they truly deserve the slander. We have a grading scale going from A+ for no fraudulence here, all the way to F for fraud. Got it? Now with that being said, let's start with everybody's favorite 10,000-year-old loser, Immortal. Look, this entry wasn't surprising anyone. I figured we'd just get the obvious out the way first. When it comes to Immortal, this nigga is garbage.
This nigga is trash.
Just absolute booty butt cheeks. I guess we'll just start with his in-series record. This man is the world's angriest amputee, just swinging with no hands in sight. This dude can't fight at all. He kind of just gorilla rushes everyone he meets before getting put on his ass instantly. Let's look at how things got this bad. Immortal started things off as one of the strongest beings on the planet, allegedly. He was a great leader for the Guardians, allegedly. A competent fighter, allegedly. And respected the world over as an ancient genius capable of bringing a level head to any situation, allegedly. Now, of course, he lost his fight with Omni-Man in season 1 when the Guardians got smoked, but I didn't hold it against him. After all, he actually put up a pretty good fight, and by that point, we didn't know anyone capable of boxing a full viltrumite. But then, he comes back towards the end of the season and gets his ass beat again. Now, I was a little more skeptical here, but it makes all the sense in the world. If he can't beat Omni-Man with the team, why could he beat him solo? But then, the losses started piling up. He got packed by 2 separate Invincibles in 2 separate timelines, got his ass beat by the Sequids, and he even lost to the fucking Mauler twins. The Mauler twins! Baby Oliver was brutalizing the Mauler twins. But he still tries the entire show to act like he's hot shit even though he's going through a midlife crisis. Long life crisis? I don't know, some type of crisis. He gets himself a girlfriend that's way too young for him, he starts trying to compensate for being washed up, he starts having mood swings, all of the usual hallmarks you can think of. And he just keeps performing worse and worse as a leader until eventually he and his useless girlfriend finally leave the team for good. Thank the Lord. Now you might be saying, Tearless Man, I don't see how you could possibly see that as a good thing. He might be a dick, but Immortal still is one of the most powerful beings on the planet. But believe it or not, him leaving might have been one of the best things to ever grace the Guardians. Introducing Britt, the new team leader of the Guardians and an actual Immortal with complete indestructibility as his power. This is what truly convinced me that Immortal was useless. The Guardians under Britt's watch jumped from being vaguely incompetent to a well-oiled machine. Just look at their handling of the Sequids. Under Britt, they're actually pulling off team maneuvers, every member is pulling their weight, and all without fake-ass Abe Lincoln trying to swing his regenerating dick around. Immortal basically has all of his best feats off screen, can't get a win for the life of him, and has the team leading skills of a semi-delirious 4th grader. He's going to get our first failing grade for the day. But our next character is a lot less of a no-brainer, and he's actually one of the most debated characters in the franchise. Whether you love him or hate him, nobody is more discussed than Omni-Man. Boy, shit really done changed for Nolan these past couple seasons, huh? And not all of it for the negative. Y'all remember what season 1 Nolan was like? Dude was an absolute menace to society. He committed at least one genocide that I can remember on screen, squad wiped the Guardians, and killed thousands of Earthlings. But luckily, he started to realize the error of his ways and build a new life for himself. He allied with Alan the Alien, got cool with the Coalition, and resolved to fight the Viltrumites. Heck, he even managed to duke it out with Thragg of all people and blow up the Viltrumite homeworld. But personally, if I were Omni-Man, I would have pulled a redo of the Flaxen Massacre on the Coalition of Planets for giving me this trash-ass, garbage-ass, yee-yee-ass fit.
Ain't no way, boy. Boy, ain't no way, boy.
What type of monstrosity is this costume? I'd have been back on Earth begging Art on my hands and knees for a new suit. I do not care that he said no, I would have kidnapped the nigga if I had to. They have my boy out here looking like a Spy Kid's thumb. No shoes on, no drawers on, grippers all the way out, disgusting color combination, 2 short long sleeves, and an ugly ass logo.
Ugh. Brother, ugh. What's that?
What's that, brother?
Maybe the viltrumites should win after all. They might be a race of genocidal space Nazis, but at least they can dress. He even pulled up in his garbage fit to try and get Debbie back. I'd have punched the nigga too if he came back wearing that mess. In all seriousness though, I was really happy that Nolan didn't get a bite out of those Debbie cakes. After everything that had happened between them, I would have had to reach through the screen and shake the woman if she took him back. I was super happy that they let her actually tee off on him for all the stuff he'd done. I was so proud of her. Whole scene had me on my strong independent woman playlist. I might not be strong, independent, or a woman, but we were playing that hoe nonetheless. She even moved on and found someone new. Turned Omni-Man right into Spider-Man. He got slimed by a nigga named Paul out of nowhere. At least I was actually happy about it this time. But as always, all good things must come to an end. I figured where things were going once they broke her and Paul up off screen. Now they have Debbie flying off to another planet with Nolan to end the season. It hasn't happened yet, but Debbie, if you take that man back, you are the biggest bird of all time. Bigger than a cassowary, bigger than an ostrich, a bigger bird than Naruto for Sasuke, than Lotto for 21 Savage. Matter of fact, you'd be a caged bird, because he called you a pet, right? A pet. Mind you, he did this right before he beat your son into a coma and flew off to have a baby with another woman. A baby you ended up raising because he went to space prison. I get that he's changed, Debbie, but he's already changing without getting back with you. I promise you don't need to do nothing strange to make him change. At the end of the day though, despite my ramblings, Omni-Man is doing everything he can to redeem himself, clutched up to take out Viltrum, and somehow ate those 2 orbit shots from Thragg. Low-key, the only point I could take away from him this past season is how garbage his outfit is. He honestly could be our first ever A tier, but the fit is unfortunately just that terrible. He goes at the top of B tier. But our next entrant, I don't even want to give him the dignity of an intro. Hit the transition. Next up, we have Robot, and this is going to be our shortest section of the day. There is no person, creature, or thing in this show that I hate with the sheer passion I do Rudy. I will not be making any jokes here. I will not be pushing any agenda. All I need to do is literally read what the man does on screen. Let's try saying it out loud. Robot is a grown man who cloned a high schooler so that he could take said high schooler's body and make it into a middle schooler's because he has the hots for a girl who is technically an adult but looks like a middle schooler. Let me keep going. After the high schooler, who he low-key body snatched, dies, he proceeds in front of all his friends and family to steal Rexplode's name at his own funeral after already sealing his appearance. Let me keep going. He then spends all of Season 4 constantly disobeying and challenging the only competent leader the Guardians have ever had in Brit, which results in him nearly ending the world via deep-throating a Sequid before thankfully being booted from our dimension and sent to another planet for his hubris. I could, of course, keep going because this isn't mentioning the various other illegal, stupid, or immoral acts he's engaged in as the show has gone on, which will be enough for an hour-long video on its own. And with everything I've said, it some way, somehow, supposedly gets so much worse in the comics. I have no jokes. I have no puns. There is no nigga in this show who is lamer than Robot. He unfortunately, however, just barely crosses the threshold for basic competence. Enough that I am forced, unfortunately, not to fail him completely and give him a D grade. The lowest of all D grades, but a D grade nonetheless. But luckily, our next character is a lot less universally hateable, and certainly much more of a debate to place. You know him, you love him, he's the reason this video exists, he's... You know, I actually really enjoyed flawed protagonists. Going from Hunter x Hunter, Rin from the Poppy Wars, Elmo from Sesame Street, you name him, I love him. It feels a lot more realistic when a character isn't a perfect goody two-shoes and really has to struggle and grow to enact their heroism. But there's a difference between being notably flawed versus being genuinely insufferable, and Mark unfortunately has spent a lot of these last 2 seasons towing the line. Mark has a lot of reasons to be pretty messed up. He's seen stuff that none of us could even imagine going through in real life. So if he acts like a dick to a few people or doesn't trust Cecil, I'm not going to get on him. Even as he started going Punisher mode, I didn't like it, but I trusted where it was going. But for me, the bus finally stopped during the Invincible War. For those who are unaware, a bunch of alternate marks were unleashed by Angstrom and were causing havoc the world over. Millions of people lost their homes, their families, and their very lives. But luckily, they were weaker than Mark for the most part, and he took some of them on to prevent more casualties and help save the world. Nah, I'm just kidding. He actually spent the entire war just sitting on his ass doing nothing.
Is this nigga serious or what?
Yeah, he spent the entire war fighting alternate variants of him, by the way, on his butt sitting by Eve's hospital bed. Mind you, him being there was explicitly against her wishes and achieved absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, his mother and brother were out there with a dozen walking nukes gunning for them as he picks his nose in the GDA sick ward. But the other insufferable thing about Mark is his inconsistency. Depending on the day, Mark is anywhere from top 5 in his universe to top 5 in his neighborhood. The same guy who killed Conquest was out here getting bullied by the Mauler twins. The same guy who blew up Viltrum was getting pressed by Lou. And don't give me that BS about him holding back either, unless you think he was holding it back against these random ass centipedes. Now that I think about it, Earthy should be capable of fending off the Viltrumites. Low-key, Lou could have soloed Conquest by himself. Still, very disappointing on the part of my fellow Caribbean brother. What's that? Mark is half Asian and half Viltrumite. Oh, silly viewer, he's Jamaican. He's always been Jamaican. You sure you didn't bump your head? Let me explain the lore behind Jamaican Mark like a math problem. You see, Mark times Eve was going to equal a baby, but you have to subtract Mark since he went to the Viltrumite War. As a result, Eve decided to subtract the baby and in her depression and more sedentary lifestyle, engaged in some big time addition. Now when Mark came back to his girl being not so little in the middle, he didn't take any issue with it in the slightest. Oh, not at all. Matter of fact, the first thing he did with Adam Eve was make like Adam and Eve. In the comics, it's even more blatant that this man was overly going for chubby Eve, which is of course how the Jamaican Mark meme started. If you ever hung out with a Jamaican brother, you know they like their women with more love, if you catch my drift. Pretty soon you had people making every edit under the sun with Jamaican Mark. Race swap Jamaican Mark, flying Jamaican Mark, hand-drawn Jamaican Mark, you name it, someone made it. Mark's love for BBWs had retroactively altered his very genes in a way the Mauler twins could never. Mark always performs in clutch time, is extremely perseverant, and is also Caribbean, but he's also very up and down, kind of an asshole, and has a pretty bad win-loss ratio. He's our perfect C tier. But Mark has always been the subject of heavy debate. Our next character is one of the only ones who everyone agrees finally beat the fraud allegations. Everyone besides me, that is. But before we get to Thragg, I just wanted to ask you that you please like, share, and subscribe. If you do, you're goated and sexy and your booty is fat. With that out of the way, let's get to the region. You know, Thragg was so close to not being on this list after the finale. I'd seen the Thragg fraud allegations all season, but I'd never bought into them. I'd been spoiled enough on the comics that I knew he was really that guy. Once he got those hands up, the slander was going down. And fair play to the man. He almost did it. He one-shot Oliver, no-sold Mark, hit Nolan with the Airbender Fist of Doom. Heck, he even bitched Mark on his own planet into letting him revive his race. But after the finale aired, I started thinking a little harder. And outside of running the ones, Thragg might be the biggest fraud in the entire series. But actually, let's start with fighting. Thragg usually gets cited as the strongest Viltrumite of all time by show watchers, and even comic readers only put him second below a certain spoiler character. But I have a theory that Thragg might actually be weaker than another Viltrumite. Thetis. Hear me out, let me land with this. Now I know that Thragg tore Thetis' head off like a gorilla attacking a sickly Victorian child. I know that Thragg was explicitly stated to be the strongest Viltrumite. But let's take a deeper look at things. The Thetis that Thragg fought was old, exhausted, and hadn't fought in thousands of years. Plus, he had a massive knife wound that had just been torn open. Even still, he was able to spend portions of the episode literally 1v3ing Viltrumites who had been fighting for millennia. Back when Thetis was on the streets, Thragg openly admitted to the Emperor that Thetis was the strongest Viltrumite in their company. Still, he said the betrayer seemed soft and weak after he came back. But when the Emperor told him to go squabble about it with Thetis, all of a sudden Mr. Kill All Dissenters Thragg turned into Thorfinn. Instantly broke eye contact and said he'd been mistaken. Nigga must have thought they were finna jump. Once Argo told him to run the ones, he suddenly found inner peace. Thragg basically just pulled a Jake Paul. He waited until Thetis was old, injured, and hadn't fought in centuries before he finally went for his get back. Low-key, I don't think he was aura farming when he spent the Viltrum fight floating in place. I think he was just frozen in fear because he saw Thetis again. But power aside, Thragg is a terrible leader. Let's look at the facts. When Thragg stepped up his region, he inherited a star-spanning nation with billions of viltrumites ruling an entire galaxy with an iron fist. By the time we get to the finale, he's down to 37 homeless niggas begging Mark to pretty please let them twerk on some Earthlings. Now, some will argue that outside circumstances led to that happening, but at the end of the day, it's all Thragg. Thragg decided that it'd be a great idea to implement a nationwide purge on Viltrum despite it not making anyone that much stronger. Thragg thought it'd be a great idea to keep exploiting and antagonizing the rest of the galaxy despite knowledge that there were like 30 plus things out there capable of smoking Viltrumites. Thragg somehow managed to let 3 guys he can one-shot get past him in order to blow up his home planet. Thragg somehow failed to invade the coalition of planets' home turf despite literally having a mole shut down their defense systems. Thragg is a terrible strategist, terrible commander, and has the nation-building skills of the US Confederacy, and sadly enough, I don't know who should be more insulted by that. At least no one can take away the fact that his lineup is crispy. Clearly the man's been wearing his Thragg. Let's move on. Thragg is an amazing fighter, but is incompetent at literally everything, and I do mean everything else. If that man couldn't fight, he'd easily be an F, but his hands get into at least D. So coming in at 5th place, we have today's biggest loser, Immortal. Coming in hot for a tied 3rd place, we have Rage Bait Rudy and history's strongest loser, Thragg. Coming in at 2nd, we have the world's most deadly Jamaican, Mark Grayson himself. And last, but certainly not least, our number 1 spot goes to Nolan Thumb Grayson. Here's our final tier list, and if you want to know how the rest of these characters got here, check out this playlist right here. I love all you beautiful people, and I'll see you next time.